Welcome from Las Vegas, Nevada, the host city of NAB 2014. We're here on the 45th floor of the Trump International Hotel. This is Cinema 5D on the Couch, presented by B&H, the professionals source, Vitech Videocom, Tools on Air, and Zeiss.
Welcome to another episode of Cinema 5D on the Couch, today with our sponsor Tools on Air and Neil Anderson, their international sales manager.
Hi.
Hi Neil. So let's talk about your systems. I mean, I'm from production world. I'm not really, involved a lot in post-production. I do editing, I do that kind of stuff, some color correction, but all this live edit is quite new to me. We use your system here, so to make our lives easier, so we can edit while we're recording, but it's a completely new field for me. What do you guys do, and what are the products you work on, and
Okay. Well, Tools on Air is a Mac software developer, so we have a variety of ingest and playout products that we've developed, and I guess we fit either side of the post-production workflow. So we have some ingest products, which you guys use, which is the live cut system, and we have some playout products for TV channel playout, live playout of video and graphics. So on the ingest side of things, we have an application called Just-In, which is a multi-camera recording application. What's great about that is we can record into things like QuickTime, ProRes, MXF, and we can frame accurately record different camera ISOs. But as soon as we start recording, we can edit straight away. So we can really speed up the post-production process from the on-set, on-location scenario. Once we've got the material in, obviously we can use Final Cut, we can use Premiere Pro, we can use Avid. But what enhances the ingest process, I guess, is Live Cut, which is our EDL recording product. So what we're doing there is we're recording typically the GPI output from a vision mixer, and recording those tally lights as an EDL. And we can hand that off to the editor as we're recording the event. So it really speeds up things. So if you're working in episodic TV, soaps, sports, music festivals, corporate events, anything where you've got a big multicam job and you want to get it finished and edited as quickly as possible. So that's pretty cool. What we can also do is add some additional metadata as well. So we can have like a producer or a studio manager actually adding metadata as markers into the edit from an iPad, for example. So again, you can mark good take, bad take, he swore, he got sent off, those kinds of little useful tools that the editors, they've got the metadata in the timeline and they can see exactly where any fixes need to be made. So yeah, what Live Cut does is it records our ISOs and the multicam edits. So the editor really just has to open the file, the project file, and everything's there. The ISOs are there, all the cuts are in the timeline, and they can make the changes really quickly with the multicam tools or the trim tools and things like that. So from a production point of view, it's just a huge workflow time saver, I guess, so that the editor doesn't have to build the multicam clip themselves. Typically, I guess you guys are recording a program output as well. You've got all the cuts in there, but you've got to find where the cuts are. Do you use that as a reference, or do you throw it away and just go with the ISOs? So it just makes that whole process a lot easier.
Cool. And it doesn't matter which editing software you use?
Yeah, I mean, we have to be pretty flexible in this day and age. We came from, I guess, the Final Cut 7 world. But we have great support for Final Cut 10, which you guys use, as well as Premiere Pro and Avid as well. So some of the stuff we do, so the Just-In application, which does our sort of core recording, we actually have a panel for Premiere Pro. So for editors who just want to capture multiple cameras straight inside their NLE, that's quite a useful little piece of functionality as well.
Cool. So what is Tools on Air? You're a Vienna-based company, so you're based where we are from.
Yeah.
We got in touch with you guys because, I had the stupid idea not stupid, but the spontaneous idea to make this show like 1.5 months before NAB. And we was just like a little bit late, but yeah, we tried to manage to get in touch with you guys, and you were generous enough to, give us a chance to use your software on this. And it worked quite well. Tell us a little bit about the company.
Sure, yeah. I mean, Tools on Air came to market around about 2008. And so historically, the company is actually, the people who work there today have come from post-production and broadcast. And we developed the software applications because there was, frankly, a gap in the market. Where I guess Apple had made Final Cut Pro such a dominant editing system, but people wanted to really complete the workflow from ingest, post-production, and play-out. So we have the suite of applications that we've developed over the years, and we run exclusively on Mac today. We work with Mac Minis, Mac Pros, we use AJA hardware, we use Blackmagic hardware, really kind of giving people a lot of flexibility. So typically for ingest, we're using maybe Mac Minis rack-mounted in the Sonnet X-Max, but we can also use the new Mac Pros, of course, which are really, really powerful. So I guess as we move into sort of higher resolutions beyond HD, that's where things like the new Mac Pro are going to be really great for us. So we've built these applications, and now moving forward, we're adding more and more, I guess, functionality where the core applications do 90% of what most people need. But what we find with the bigger, more complex projects is where somebody wants just a little bit extra in terms of functionality, and we've started to develop I guess a next generation development platform which we call Encore, and the first product that's come out of that is just Control. And that at the moment is more about our playout systems, so handling failover between our master playout and our redundant playout systems. But moving forward, what we're going to do is take little core pieces of the different applications and make them plugins for the Encore system, so that we can have a customer coming to us saying, well, I want some ingest, but I want some playout, and I need some metadata management for my production process. I need some transcoding, some files for approvals, and we can start building that kind of plug-in approach to building the technology out, while at the same time still using Apple hardware and third-party partner hardware. So we're very conscious of the fact that we're using commodity technology, really the best of the commodity technology that's available.
Cool. I think you're one of the few manufacturers focusing on the Mac platform in that field, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Post-production has always been quite Windows heavy, like a lot of the post-production software. So it's a rarity, right?
Well, I guess, I mean, from my background, I mean, we've always been Apple post-production people, all the way back into the very first nonlinear editors on Mac back in the early 90s. And the Mac has always been very popular in desktop post-production. There's always been sort of high-end systems, your Flames and your Quantels and Avid have been there, and they've been on Mac, and sometimes they've been on PC. But I guess when Apple really came to market with Final Cut, they changed a lot of people's perceptions about what can be done with desktop editing. And I guess we rode off the back of that, and have really sort of opened the market to not just your traditional broadcasters and your big post facilities, but actually where the market is now is that everybody wants to do media. Everyone wants to handle video. They want it online on your iPad, as well as traditional TV. So it's kind of a huge market there, that really that's where we get so much interest. It's not just the traditional broadcasters and post companies who want to make their lives a bit easier, but it can be anyone from web TV to large banks, to multinationals, to there's all sorts of football stadiums, churches. All these people want to handle digital media now, and of course resolutions keep going up, frame rates keep going up. So how we handle those, 4K and ultra high definition. Apple is still very focused on, with the new Mac Pro and Final Cut 10. They're still focused on this market. May not be as obvious to a lot of people, but things like ProRes is still a very dominant format.
It's getting more dominant even, I think, with more cameras coming out that record directly into ProRes. We just wish that, Apple would further develop ProRes, because I think, not much has happened in the past few years.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's interesting at NAB this last week, there's been every major camera vendor is supporting ProRes, has licensed it.
It's pretty essential. I think that's what made the Alexa, one part of what made the Alexa so alluring, because it's so easy to edit.
Absolutely.
And I think it's a good step by Sony to offer, they will offer an upgrade for the F55, F5 to record directly into ProRes, and that will make it much more feasible for production companies. Because I work a lot with those cameras as well, and sometimes they require us to, the production companies require us to record into a Samurai blade from Atomos, simply because we can have directly into DNX HD for Avid or ProRes, and now that might not be necessary anymore. It
Absolutely.
makes our lives also shooters much easier if you just can record it directly into the camera.
Well, that's, I mean, I've had quite a lot of debate in the last week with one of my colleagues about RAW versus ProRes workflow, and you're right. I mean, for me, Arri licensing ProRes was the best thing they ever did. I think they really just went, well, here's a great codec. RAW is fantastic, but there's a lot of processing overhead involved in that. Huge data rates. do you really need that? Is ProRes good enough? And in a lot of cases, it's absolutely good enough.
Yeah.
Certainly for any kind of broadcast.
It's simply great to edit. I mean, we all know we can now edit, every format with Final Cut 10 and Premiere. It doesn't matter, but still, performance-wise, a codec that is made for editing, like ProRes, is the best.
Absolutely, a frame-based codec. Yeah. I mean, ProRes, we haven't seen a huge amount of new development functionally, I guess, but it does support higher resolutions than HD and higher frame rates. And it wouldn't take much of a leap for them to be able to introduce very high frame rates, which I guess is where we're all going with ultra high definition and 4K. It's going to go 100p, 120p, and probably higher for certain types of productions. So, I mean, this is where new hardware like the Mac Pro is really going to help everybody. Final Cut 10 has been, rewritten to handle these high resolutions and frame rates. And yeah, I mean, ProRes has been very popular with all of our users historically, but we've also, for the show, we've added support for MXF, XD-Cam, and AVC Intra. And those are GOP-based codecs, so they're a little bit harder to handle from a mathematics processing point of view, but there are a lot of people who do need to use those codecs still. So yeah, I mean, it is interesting to see all the cameras coming out. Everyone does a camera now. AJA have got a great looking camera. Blackmagic have been doing cameras for a few years, and everyone's licensing ProRes. So, I mean, for me, the fundamental with ProRes as a format is at the end of the day, every file that goes into the iTunes store from a major broadcaster or a major feature company, it's a ProRes file.
Yep.
And Apple are that gatekeeper. So for me, it's like if the high end has to submit into that format, if people can shoot with it, if they can edit with it and deliver that, then it makes life a lot easier than it has been in the past.
Yeah, and I think, there is a lot of hype around RAW.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is that a lot of inexpensive cameras are capable of shooting RAW now, and it is great. It's great to handle. It's great to work with RAW because you have so much possibilities. The problem is, in a real production environment, it is terrible to work with because it's just immense. The amount of data is just crazy. And even very high-end productions very often shoot on the Alexa in ProRes, TV series. And
exactly, TV series especially. But I think, from what I understand, Scorsese, when he did Hugo, he ended up just processing, handling the ProRes and delivering that as a feature.
Same for Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
I think I heard that the season they're shooting now is the first one they're going to shoot in RE RAW on the Alexa.
Right.
So far, I think the second or third season was shot on ProRes. So that means something. If series on that level with a really big budget don't shoot in RAW. And the funny thing is now that the cheaper cameras have RAW, but they don't have ProRes. Like with Sony. Sony just started with when they brought out the F5, it only does RAW, with the appropriate recorder, but it doesn't do 4K in the XAVC codec, which is what you want to have because it's a really good codec.
Yeah, absolutely. The challenge with, my experience with post-production and broadcast is in the world of acquisition, there are new cameras coming out every 6 to 12 months, so many cameras, new codecs, new formats, new flavors of RAW, new resolutions to deal with. And it's a real minefield because a lot of production people rush out, buy the latest camera because it's amazing, no doubt. And they'll go and shoot a bunch of material. And then they give it to their post-production department or facility and they'll be like, you've just given me like 5 terabytes of RAW to process. Yeah. Which, if certain productions, you could justify it. But for me, I think in a lot of cases, and this is what I've seen over the years, if the picture is good enough, at a given quality, then you will handle it that way and you'll just post-produce it. It's great to have high-end RAW, uncompressed or compressed RAW, but at the end of the day, if it's an absolute nightmare to deal with, then it makes life a lot harder. I think, to be honest, that's kind of where Red have struggled, I guess, a bit more recently. They kind of, I don't know if they invented RAW, but they were the real pioneers of the RAW workflow.
They are one of the few camera manufacturers that have a RAW codec which you can influence. You don't have to record in one set, data rate.
Yeah.
So you can choose your compression, which is nice. So that kind of worked for them. But still, it is more difficult to deal with.
Yeah, exactly.
But we had a talk here with Philip Bloom, Ryan Koo, and Joe Marine from No Film School the other day here. And we also talked about RAW and 4K. And I think it's same with 4K for post-production houses. Most of them are not ready to do it yet.
Absolutely.
Even if you shoot in 4K, they down-res it to 2K to master it, which is a bit of a waste. But there are not many outlets where you can actually show 4K yet. So it's this cat and mouse game where who will be who will be the next one to step up and just upgrade the
Yeah, I mean, this
system?
is the issue. I mean, a lot of facilities have just put in 3 gig SDI infrastructure, which frankly can't cope with 4K properly, and certainly no high frame rates. So, and there's no standard beyond 3 gig SDI at the moment as well. So a facility is looking to support 4K. Well, what infrastructure do they put in?
Probably too early to invest for them.
Yeah, it is. There's kind of nothing there. I mean, Blackmagic have been pushing sort of 6 gig SDI, and now even 12 gig SDI is this is the way you can handle it. But until it's standardized and ratified, a lot of facilities are going to have to handle 4K in a kind of standalone workflow, which is going to be a challenge if there's a lot of material, if it's a big drama or a big feature.
Do you guys have requests for 4K live editing?
Well, I was, before NAB, I said to the guys, well, are we going to show some 4K? And, we had a lot of discussion about it. And, we've tested 4K, and we know we can do a certain amount of 4K based on the hardware that we use. At NAB, I've not had a single request for 4K. I think it's one of these things that we know it's coming, it is the next standard. But here in today, everyone's working with HD, at least in the world of TV. And there's no doubt, when the market is ready, when the technology is ready.
Do you think there will be like? I personally think that 4K will never be mainstream for TV because it doesn't make sense. We had another talk yesterday with Rodney Charges and Bruce Logan, 2 ASC members who are really experienced with, they shoot high-end TV, high-end feature films, and they also agreed. I mean, you would need a TV like 85 inch and sit 2 meters away from me to actually be able to see the difference to a up-res full HD file. So
yeah, absolutely. And 4K, we'll see some adoption in things like sports, high frame rate, where there is some benefit in having the higher resolution and high frame rate stuff. Sky in the UK are building a 4K truck. Good for them. They're always first. The BBC have been very standoffish about 4K and said, look, we're not going to be adopting this as a mainstream.
Well, the pay TV channels need to set themselves apart. I mean, they need to have something.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Netflix and what they're doing, they're going to be pushing it hard because, again, they like to be disruptive. But you're right. I mean, I have to say, 90% of the consumer market, are they going to really tell the difference, notice the difference? For us in the professional market, sure, you can see it. And yes, it's even more immersive, and if you're watching a football game on a 4K screen, yes, you can see the face of every person sitting in the back row and at the back of the stadium. Is that really the most important thing for most people? Probably not. So yeah, it's one of these things. It's not going away. It's certainly not like stereoscopic, which is kind of, for me, was always a bit of a fad. It's going to come. It's going to take a little bit of time for it to be really relevant.
I think what's interesting when you talk to people, it's always most interesting thing about NAB for me is always the social part, to meet people and talk about what's happening. And it's like 2 years ago when they tried, all the manufacturers tried to push 3D very hard. I think it was 3 years ago actually, and 2 years ago they still tried, but you could feel that it was over. While on the consumer side, you could still see like them pushing out all the products they announced the year before, trying to sell 3D TVs, and a lot of people bought them because you didn't have an alternative, but people ended up never using it. And you could feel it already at NAB when you talk to the professionals and other colleagues that this is not going to happen. And but with 4K, I think it is happening, but there's a lot of skepticism, and there's a big people think that they're just pushing it in order to sell more products, obviously, while a lot of TV channels especially are still not even in HD. In Europe we have a lot of channels in 720p. In Austria, like public TV 720p, they don't even shoot everything in HD yet. I mean, this is where the reality is. So absolutely. I can't see 4K being adopted for TV in anytime soon. Yeah,
I mean, people forget how long it took for HD to get widespread adoption as well. I mean, the Japanese were trialing HD back in the 80s in various flavors. It's really only in the last 10, 12 years that it's been more widely adopted. And as you say, a lot of people are still not even broadcasting it. The vast majority of channels are still not HD. So yeah, mainstream TV is going to take a while. Large outdoor screens, live entertainment venues where you've got 50-foot screens, you're going to need higher resolutions. And I think there's a place for that. I mean, at least in the UK, a lot of the music festivals that we do in the summer, people are talking about shooting those in 4K, down-resing it to HD to do the offline edit. And ultimately, I guess they'll do a 4K reconform for a long-term master, but everything will go at HD as far as TV.
For post-production, it makes a lot of sense because you can also reframe, which was something you could never do.
Yeah.
Photographers have been used to this forever.
Yeah.
You know, they can choose. I mean, they frame while shooting, but they can still optimize their composition and just crop into the image because of the high resolution. This was never possible for video.
Yeah, I
and
mean,
4K gives us this opportunity. With the price that directors of photography lose a bit of the control because it's the editor who can, after all, probably, or the producer, director, who can change things in post-production, which were probably not intended by the director of photography.
Yeah, I mean, there's notable examples in history in film, people like Stanley Kubrick and Francis Ford Coppola. You know, they sort of pioneered shooting very high, large film stocks so that they could do pan and scan because they just wanted to be able to re-rack things. But it hasn't happened traditionally in the world of TV. So yeah, it's another area. I mean, again, it goes back to the sports side of things where, they're wanting to have analysts in the studio wanting to look at specific techniques of the sports players, and they want to zoom right in on the action. And people like AJA Video have got some great hardware that does 4K HD pan and zoom and down conversion, which they've been licensing to a lot of the big high-end post companies like Quantel and EVS. So certainly there is interest in that part of the market, the baseball, the football, in every different flavor of football. We'll see some of that, but ultimately it'll be HD going out on air for a good long time. And, as you say, we've only just got to the point where we can do some HD.
Yeah. Well, we talked before about the fact that you guys are Mac only, and I was pleasantly surprised when I discovered that because I've been Mac only my entire life. I was brought up by parents who have a graphic design agency. They've been on the Mac in the 80s.
Yeah.
When everybody was saying early 90s, when I bought my first one was like, this company is going to be bankrupt within 2 years. That's when I bought my first Mac.
Right.
So this was a good surprise. Do you think for your company, is it the future to stay Mac only, or is there discussion to?
Well, this is where I mentioned the Encore technology that we've been working on. It's actually a virtual environment, so we can run it on any hardware. We can sit it on top of any operating system. So while we love Apple, and Apple is in our heart, we have to accept that they've become a totally different company than where we were even 5 or 10 years ago. They have a huge consumer business, and while the media industry is still important to them, and ProRes is critical to their long-term viability in this space, I guess, and the Mac Pro is a good reflection of their interest in it. At the same time, we have to be a little bit more flexible around what Apple decide to do next. So the Encore technology, at least it allows us to give us the flexibility of putting it on, it could be enterprise hardware, it could be Linux operating system that we can actually spin our software up on. So we'll have that flexibility. We'll always have Mac development, Mac support. Our UIs are designed for Mac. They're great to look at. They're really functional to use. So we're never going to kind of abandon Apple in that respect, but we have to be a little bit more flexible, I guess. Because you never know what Apple will do next. Yeah,
I talked to some of your colleagues on the stand on your booth about production environments, and they mentioned that you guys are thinking about going more into the production field and be more integrated with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think our ingest products are actually our most popular. Justin and LiveCut, both really sort of have been widely adopted across the world. So I guess we're going to be taking that a little bit further and helping people to be more and more able to handle material on location, in any location, and deal with it flexibly in terms of post-production workflows. So yeah, there'll be some interesting developments moving forward around that.
Great. Thanks for the talk. No problem. And NAB is wrapping up. Are you staying around, or?
I've got a flight to catch this afternoon, so I'm going to be heading back home.
So you're going to leave the packing up to other people?
Yeah, that's definitely the case.
That's the way to do it.
I've done too many shows over the years, so it's definitely a case of I get the engineers to do it.
Good. Okay, nice talking to you, and
cheers.
Let's do this again.
Okay, thanks a lot.
It was great. Thanks for watching. Also, thanks to our other sponsors, B&H, who supplied all the hardware that we're using here, Zeiss, Vitek Videocom, and Tools on Air, of course. And see you on the next show of On the Couch. Thanks.